Thank you. Thank you very much for giving me the chance to present my paper in this wonderful conference, and I'm very happy to see you. And the title of today's presentation is The Pauline Corpus in Light of Ancient Editorial Practice, a theory of the two-volume archetype. I slightly changed the title, and I think my draft is too long to read the whole manuscript within 20 minutes, so I will skip a lot of parts due to lack of time. This study aims to consider the formation of Pauline Corpus Paulinum in light of ancient editorial practice, paying attention, particular attention to the length of the scroll of the original Pauline corpus and the principle of ordering and rearranging of the Pauline corpus. The following implications will also be explored from this perspective. In what form was the Pauline corpus circulated? If the primitive edition of the Pauline corpus was transcribed on scrolls, how many volumes would it be? Actually, I would like to skip the part on the history of interpretation. You can feel free to download the draft from the chatting window. So I will just present the outline of my study. Alternatively, this work will offer a study of the formation of the Pauline corpus, focusing on the papyrological aspect of the Pauline corpus as follows. In section 2, we will consider the first edition of the Pauline corpus as a scroll. In section 3, we will analyze the philosophical corpora which were transcribed on scrolls, tracing the formation of the Pauline corpus as a scroll. We will also consider whether the length of Romans, 1 Corinthians, and 2 Corinthians, and Galatians is appropriate for the length of the ancient scrolls, such as the Herculaneum Papyri. In section 4, we will investigate the sequence of Romans, 1st and 2nd Corinthians, Galatians, as they appear in a fixed order in the early Pauline corpus. And we will confirm that it is the earliest Pauline order. There have been many studies that discuss collection of the Pauline corpus so far, but insofar as I know, there have been few studies considering the actual length of the scroll except for thesis kits, approximate calculation. Instead, in this study, we will invent a new method to estimate the length of a scroll. Moreover, thesis kit does not consider the canonical implications of the length of the Pauline corpus. In this context, the following study may provide a fresh insight into the canonical reading of the Pauline epistles. The second section is about the medium of the original Pauline corpus. In my opinion, the primitive edition of the Pauline corpus was initially copied on scroll, not in codex. So I explained this briefly, so please refer to this section for further explanations. I would like to skip this part and let's go to directly to the third section. The only scholars who calculated the hypothetical length of the Pauline corpus was thesis kit and Harry Y. Gamble. Gamble suggests 24 meters as the length of 10 epistles in the primitive edition of the Pauline corpus per his rough estimation by Skid's method. On the other hand, Skid estimates the length of the entire Pauline corpus to be 28 meters for 11 epistles. However, Skid's calculation method has some shortcomings. Skid's method is based on stichometry, which counts the number of stichos. However, depending on the width of each letter, the letters could be written densely or loosely with a considerable margin. Because dense copying in a row was possible in antiquity, it is necessary to calculate the possible length of the Pauline corpus by taking into account the minimum and maximum densities of words. Skid does not consider either that each row may contain more or fewer letters according to the length and the width of the column. The rows Skid estimated are the rows of the codex based on P46. So Skid's method should not be applied to the estimation of the length of a scroll because scrolls contain a distinct format and different densities of letters from those of codices. In order to obtain the estimated length of a scroll, it is necessary to scrutinize the ancient column. The width of a column in a codex is longer than the width of the column of a scroll. In addition, a more accurate calculation is possible by considering the width of the intercolumn between the columns. So an attempt will be made for a new calculation distinct from Skid methods, estimating the possible number of letters in a roll column. So above is the literary papyrus in the British Library, number 134, a scroll containing a literary work, which indicates that a single scroll consists of several columns and intercolumns. William A. Johnson summarizes the column and the intercolumn width of ancient papyrus scrolls as follows. Column width can be various, and he classified into 3 classes. As such, the ancient scroll manuscript traditions represent a various range of columns and intercolumns. The average column width of Herculaneum papyrus is about 4 to 6 centimeters. Also, from my observation of Herculaneum papyri, it seems to be about 13 to 23 letters per line. In class 3 above, a column width of 8 to 9 centimeters is rare. It usually represents width between 4.5 and 7.5 centimeters. However, the case below is an example of a papyrus scroll showing a column width of 9 centimeters. This is relatively wide. As above, a fragment of Demosthenes de Corona has a column width and height of 9 by 18 centimeters and represents an exceptionally wide column width. Richard Janko estimates the scroll length for each text if it had been written on a scroll, as shown above. However, there has not been discovered yet any extant ancient papyrus scrolls with the length exceeding 20 meters. Perhaps the above works were written in 2 or more scrolls because they were too long to be transcribed on one volume of scroll. In a study published in 1983, Guglielmo Cavallo deduces that a standard scroll length would have been 9 to 10 meters. However, since the 1980s, various publications of the long scrolls found in the Villa of Papyri in Herculaneum have prompted scholars to reshape the idea of the maximum length of ancient scrolls. Of the longest papyrus rolls ever discovered is Philodemus de Poematis, the first volume, which is estimated to be at least 16 meters long, while William A. Johnson postulates that scrolls with 1 meter length were possible in antiquity. He concludes that the average length of a scroll of the philosophical corpus would be around 6 to 15 meters. For example, some estimated length of a Herculaneum papyri are as follows. Whereas short scrolls were possible, It was prepared to write on scrolls approximately 10 to 15 meters in length for authoritative writings. Papyrus rolls discovered at Herculaneum indicate consistent length between 10 to 16 meters in the cases that they contain authoritative texts. In the case of Papyrus Herculaneum Paris #1, which has recently been physically studied through X-ray technology, it is estimated that is longer than 15 meters. Over 1,800 volumes of carbonized papyrus rolls have been found in the ruins of Herculaneum. The papyrus rolls of Herculaneum give an important clue to understand the documented format of the original Pauline corpus. Firstly, since the ancient town of Herculaneum was destroyed in AD 79 by the eruption of Vesuvius volcano, the materials found at Herculaneum demonstrate the uses of scroll from 1st century BC to the 1st century AD. Secondly, the Philodemus archive, one of the most significant sources of the Herculaneum papyri, was collected by Philodemus of Gadara himself, an Epicurus philosopher who resided in the villa of Papyrus and who was patronized by the family of Calpurnius Piso, a powerful Roman politician. This can be an example of the form in which an author works were collected and compiled by the author himself. Thirdly, the Herculaneum papyrus is also important in calculating the length of ancient papyrus rolls. Because the papyrus scrolls found in Egypt are almost invariably fragmentary, it is impossible to determine how many meters they were in total length. However, since the Herculaneum papyrus retains its shape, it functions as an important model of the actual length of the ancient papyrus scroll. To estimate the length of the Pauline canon through the Herculaneum papyrus, we will consider the following method, excluding empirical estimates. The method suggested by this paper is to calculate the number of the letters. For this calculation, we need to consider three premises: scriptio continua, consistency of column and intercolumn spacing, the consistency of scribal habits with regard to letter density. Firstly, we will perform the following calculations, taking into consideration the fact that since there was no space in antiquity between words, that would affect the consistency of the number of letters in a column. Secondly, it is observed in one papyrus scroll that the spacing between columns is nearly uniform. Thirdly, we should consider scribal habits with regard to letter density. The ancient scribal tradition allowed for each line to be written either loosely or relatively densely. Since loose or dense copying depends on the copyist's scribal habits, the density of letters tends to converge into the mean value in each column. Therefore, we observe that the number of letters per column appears consistently on average. After counting the number of the letters per column and observing the median number letters within the margin of error, we will consider this as the average number of letters. In this calculation, two conditions will be respectively analyzed. In the case of maximally loose copying and maximally dense copying among the whole Herculaneum papyri. For this, we calculate the number of words and letters of the Pauline canon of Codex Sinaiticus, one of the early Anjou manuscripts, as follows. Based on the whole figures, we will consider the length of the Pauline corpus according to the procedure below. A, find the average number of letters per column. B, calculate the average value of column plus intercolumn width. C, divide the number of letters in the Pauline corpus by the average number of letters per column to obtain the total number of columns required for transcription. D, column plus intercolumn width is multiplied by C, total number of columns, to get the approximate length of the scroll. So first sample is inference from one of the most loosely transcribed cases in Herculaneum papyri. One of the most loosely transcribed examples in the Herculaneum papyri is the papyrus scroll of Plodemus de Pietate. Let us look at the apograph of Papyrus Herculaneum 1077, the best preserved column in this scroll, as follows. This is the case in which the entire column is well preserved in the Herculaneum archive. In this case, letters are unusually vertically long, and there is relatively broad space between letters. Separately numbered Papyrus Herculaneum in many papyri found in Herculaneum. These papyrus fragments constitute the first book of Plodemus de Pietate as one book law. This scroll contains 86 columns, each consisting of 29 to 30 stichoi. The original length of this papyrus scroll must have been approximately 13.5 meters. If the Pauline corpus was transcribed in this way, it can be calculated as follows. In the case of the first volume, hypothetical first volume of the Pauline corpus, which included Romans, 1 Corinthians, 2 Corinthians, and Galatians, average number of letters per column is 401, and column width plus intercolumn width is 7.2 centimeters, and 95,412 divided by 401 equals 237.938. So it is approximately 238 columns. So 7.2 multiplied by 238 is 7.136 meters. So it can be the length, the hypothetical length of Romans, 1 Corinthians, and 2 Corinthians, and Galatians. By the same method, we can calculate the entire length of the Pauline corpus is 32.04 meters. The second example is inference from one of the most densely transcribed cases. So I would like to summarize only the result. Result is this: the 1.795 meters for the length of the first volume of the Pauline corpus, and the length of the entire Pauline corpus is 20.06 meters. This is the case for from the most densely transcribed case. And the next case is the inference from the papyrus scroll written in average density. This I would like to just summarize the result. Result is the length for the first volume of the Pauline corpus is 13.755 meters, and the length of the entire Pauline corpus is 27.625 meters. So I organized the whole result in the figures. So please refer to my draft. And from the above calculation of the estimated length of the Pauline Canon papyrus scrolls, we perceive that the 13 epistles of Paul are too long to fit in one volume. If the first volume of the Pauline Corpus contains Romans, 1 Corinthians, 2 Corinthians, Galatians, and if the first, second books are divided into two volumes, in the length of the two volumes fall on the average length of a papyrus scroll calculated by William Johnson. This may suggest that the papyrus scrolls of the Pauline Corpus consisted to two volumes, not one volume. Finally, we have to consider Harry Gamble's suggestion that the first edition of the Pauline Corpus may have contained 10 epistles. Based on the above letter count, Gamble's hypothetical Pauline Corpus would have had 134,263 letters. If it was transcribed as loosely as Papyrus Herculaneum 1077, it would have been 2,410 centimeters. On the other hand, if it is copied as densely as Papyrus Herculaneum 1570, it could have been 1,278 centimeters, which is significantly different from a Ski's calculation of 28 centimeters, 2,806 centimeters, and Gamble's approximate estimation, and this length is sufficiently length for one volume of scroll. Therefore, if the Pauline Corpus initially began with 10 books, this is not contradictory to my claim that the primitive edition could be written on scroll, and a codex is not conditio sine qua non for compiling the Pauline Corpus. However, the arguments we have made so far do not allow us yet to make a definite conclusion, because we also need to consider whether Romans, 1 Corinthians, 2 Corinthians, Galatians, Ephesians was the original sequence of the Pauline Corpus, as we presume above. In the following section, I will propose that the Romans, 1 and 2 Corinthians, and Galatians are first volume compiled as the Pauline Corpus, contrary to Gamble's assumption. Further, Gambus asserts that the original order includes the sequence of Ephesians, Galatians. The early Pauline canonical order appears in a variety of ways, and the relationship between the length of papyrus scroll and the Pauline canonical order tradition can be considered as follows. This can be another section about the original order of the Pauline corpus. However, as we can see in this figure, the many early manuscripts support the sequence of Romans, 1 Corinthians, 2 Corinthians, and Galatians. We can find some early exceptions from P46 and Maximus, Marius, Victorinus, because the order of Galatians and Ephesians is inverted in this tradition. However, I would like to explain this phenomenon just like this. P46 and the order of Marius, Victorinus show a sequence according to length, except Romans, 1 Corinthians, 2 Corinthians, Ephesians, Galatians. However, the order of Romans, 1 Corinthians, 2 Corinthians, Galatians, Ephesians in other early manuscripts betrays the criterion of length. Criterion of length is the criterion for arranging each book. There must have been some criterion to arrange the order. There were many criteria for this task in antiquity. However, it is very interesting because some early Christians adopted the criterion of length. That is actually very rare criterion in antiquity. So according to the criterion of dissimilarity, I think the criterion of length, especially a criterion the decreasing order, is temporarily prior to chronological order, because chronological order was quite a bit a familiar sequence to ancient people. And I think the Pauline corpus was initially compiled without noticing the existence of Book of Acts. So early Christians actually did not specifically know the chronological life, or chronological order of Pauline epistles. So in my opinion, if the criterion of length is prior to the chronological criterion, I think the order begins with Romans reflects some original order. And however, a problem is P46 because the order of Galatians and Ephesians are inverted in P46 and Marius Victorinus. However, we also have to think about the count of letter because according to the count of letters, actually Galatians is fewer than Ephesians. In my opinion, when 2 volumes of scrolls were merged into 1 volume of codex, I think some early editors tried to rearrange the order of Pauline corpus, and the result is P46 because P46 is exactly fitting for the decreasing order. So this is why the order of Galatians and Ephesians were reversed in P46. This is my hypothesis. So according to my hypothesis, the Ephesians is the first book of the second volume. So we can understand why Ephesians was understood as a kind of preface of the Pauline epistles. Although it is not the first book of the Pauline order, because there were 2 volumes of Pauline scrolls, and Ephesians functions as a kind of preface. I inserted some textual critical explanation about this. I would like to skip this.